Always been at the forefront of speaking up for those who have been oppressed. We recognise the interconnectivity of the countries of Europe and the world at large, and that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We've had calls in this House to address serious human rights abuses occurring in all places over the world, from China in the east to here in the west, and addressing the issues in our own country as well. So I find it odd that we've heard nothing of what has been a well-publicised, high-profile, peaceful protest being violently suppressed and dispersed by armed government forces. Ranks of uniformed and armoured military figures, stripped of their badges and ID tags, converged on protesters. An officer on horseback trampled over a disabled woman. Around 200 arrests were made and over 60 vehicles seized by the state. It sounds like something you'd see from Russia, or actions which we'd condemn in Hungary or Poland, but instead it is happening in the supposedly liberal democracy of Canada, and so no condemnation has been forthcoming. In order to legally permit this level of force, Prime Minister Trudeau invoked the Emergency Act of 1988, the first time this act has ever been used since it replaced the War Measure Act of 1914. And not being satisfied with merely dispersing protesters, the state froze the finances associated with certain individuals and companies believed to be involved in the protests. These are people who committed no crime, who has been not convicted lawfully in court, and who the government decided to punish anyway, because they might have been connected with a protest which was inconvenient to the government. It was an unprecedented act by the state against its citizens, which should be roundly condemned. And so, Leader, I'm asking you to write to the Canadian Ambassador, Nancy Smith, and condemn the excessive force used by the government on the overreach that is happening there to its citizens. Authoritarianism is a threat to democracy, no matter whose foot the boot is on.
President, honourable members, we keep discussing here our European democratic values that underpin all of our actions. I worked in Syria and Pakistan for many years as a diplomat and therefore value democracy very highly. Now, the invitation to Canadian PM Justin Trudeau is an invitation to someone who's been trampling on democratic rights, who's been cracking down on people who protested against disproportionate corona measures, peoples who were supporting a non-sanctioned movement coming under criticism. So clearly the values of democracy are being despised by this individual. Let us not give someone like this any speaking time in this House of Democracy.
Bonjour, et nous voilà au Parlement de Bruxelles. Nous attendons donc Justin Trudeau qui va faire son speech. Donc il y a quelques députés en fait, pas beaucoup. Beaucoup plus de public que de députés. Donc là je pense qu'il arrive. Le voilà. Donc aussi pour l'honorer, j'ai mis ce t-shirt. Voilà, moi je pense plutôt à tous ces Canadiens qui ont subi sa folie.
And with the Prime Minister of Canada, the way he's behaving right now, he's exactly like a tyrant, like a dictator. He's like Ceausescu in Romania. If even you doubt, if you raise doubts about the vaccines, you're outcasted. What's the difference between what he does and what happened under the Inquisition? See, on one side they say, well, we should not believe in God, but on the other side they say, believe in science. We don't have to. Science is not about belief. Science is about measurements, conclusions, hypotheses, and arguments. We got to a point right now where even if you say something, if you raise any doubts, you're already considered, as whatever, they label you in very different ways. This is not okay. And I have to tell you, that when I saw the protests in Canada, the way the truckers over there reacted, You know, I got in touch with some of them, others contacted me. I congratulated them, and I want to use this opportunity to thank them. And I hope this movement for freedom and for rights is spreading all around the world. Because at the end of the day, we have to make sure that all these elected officials, they understand that they were elected in those offices to work for the people, not to behave like masters of slaves. Thank you.
Annie, I'll just...
Poštovane kolege, dragi građani, premijeru Trudeau. Sloboda, pravo izbora, pravo na život i zdravlje, pravo na rad za mnoge od nas, to su temeljna ljudska prava za koje su milijuni građana Europe i svijeta položili svoje živote. Za obranu naših prava i prava naše djece, koje smo stjecali stoljećima, mnogi od nas, uključujući i mene, spremni smo riskirati vlastitu slobodu i položiti vlastite živote. Nažalost, danas su među nama i oni koji gaze te temeljne vrijednosti. Kanada, nekada simbol modernog svijeta, je pod vodstvom vaše kvazi liberalne čizme proteklih mjeseci postala simbol kršenja temeljnih ljudskih prava i građanskih sloboda. Gledali smo kako konjima gaze žene, kako samohranim roditeljima blokirate bankovne račune da ne mogu platiti djeci školovanje, da ne mogu platiti lijekove, da ne mogu platiti račune za struju i vodu, da ne mogu platiti rate kredita za svoje domove. Za vas su to možda liberalne metode. Međutim, za mnoge građane svijeta to je diktatura najgore vrste. Budite uvjereni da građani svijeta, udruženi, mogu zaustaviti svaki režim koji želi uništiti slobodu građana, bilo bombama, bilo štetnim farmaceutskim proizvodima. Hvala.
On Article 195 out that it would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
Let me begin by saying that the Canadian Prime Minister, who tried to advise us on how to deal with the farmers' protests last year and swore that Canada will be there to defend the rights of peaceful protest, has run away from the truckers and others, even as we speak on the 30th of January 2022. They are rallying against vaccine mandates, inflation, supply chain disruptions, etc. So the fellow who was trying to give us advice has actually gone into hiding. He has betrayed their trust. The saddest thing about betrayal is that it never comes from your enemies. It comes from those you have faith in. Some of the most poisonous people come disguised as friends and family. My motto has always been to protect the oppressed, even if he is my enemy. But I will never forgive the traitor, even if he is my friend.